You want to learn a language, but you find yourself doing literally everything but. And then there's the guilt and the shame, and like you just kind of dogpile on yourself because you're lazy. Except you're not lazy, you're using the wrong approach for your brain. Let's fix that. My name is Jamie, I'm a language coach, and in this video, I'm gonna show you why procrastination is actually your brain telling you something, and how you can listen so you can get your motivation back. Let me venture a guess and say that you learn to learn languages in the worst possible ways. Textbooks, vocab lists, conjugations, like the most boring things possible. So what happens when we try to learn languages outside of school? Let me know how many of these you relate to. You find yourself downloading all of the apps to learn a language because none of them seem to work. You keep your Duolingo streak up, but it's not actually helping your language learning. You spend a lot of time learning all these different language learning strategies and all these vlogs from language learners, but no time actually studying your language. You feel insanely overwhelmed by all the different ways there are to learn a language and how many different things there are to learn. Keep procrastinating day after day after day, promising that tomorrow is going to be different. Now, with the untrained eye, this procrastination looks like a personal problem. There's something wrong with you. But you don't actually have to blame yourself, because the problem isn't you, the problem is the systems that you're using. Procrastination is like your brain waving a red flag saying, help, please, this isn't working for me. So your brain isn't actually avoiding language learning, it's avoiding the strategies that you're using to learn a language. It's avoiding the boredom, it's avoiding the overwhelm, it's avoiding the frustration, the fear. So what you end up doing is you either end up putting all of your effort into trying to learn a language and then still being disappointed, or just avoiding it altogether. So let's change that. For example, do you spend a lot of time memorizing lists of vocabulary and you have all this vocabulary you're supposed to be reviewing, but it's just hours and hours and hours worth of words? And even if you spend the time to learn them, your brain just kind of like forgets them. And so it feels like all the studying you're doing is a complete waste of your time. Number one thing to know about this one is that you don't need nearly as much vocabulary as you may think that you need. Again, I know that we've learned how to learn a language by memorizing all this vocabulary, but that is just to take vocab tests and actually to use a language. So that said, if you want to learn this vocabulary in a way that will actually make you feel good and show you progress, practice using these words the way that you eventually want to use them. So for example, if you want to learn to speak Spanish and you're learning Spanish vocabulary, practice it by speaking Spanish sentences. This can be to yourself, this can be to a friend, a language tutor, anything, but practice that vocabulary by speaking and using it in the way that you eventually want to use it. And also, don't try and do this with like 100 words at once. Do it with like 2 or 3. It's helpful if they're related. So not only are you learning that vocabulary in an effective way that your brain can actually use, but you're also building up your speaking skills, which is your actual goal. If you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, for example, if you are in a foreign language class and everybody around you seems to be more conversational and more free to speak than you are, or maybe it seems like they understand things more than you do, it can be really easy to shut down and feel really, really insecure and afraid to even try, because your brain is so loud with all of these fears that you're shut down. I mentioned this in a conversation online lately, and I'm gonna repeat it here. Don't compare yourself to other people, A, because they aren't you, and B, because you don't actually know where their skills are. It may appear that they understand things a lot better, or they could just be faking it till they make it. They could be a lot more conversational than you, or they might just be saying a lot of words, most of which are wrong. Everybody's skills in the language are different and they're completely irrelevant to yours. Language learning is not a contest. I know some people will make it seem like it is. It's not. Language learning is a personal journey, and I don't want you comparing your journey to somebody else's journey, especially when you don't know their journey. You don't know these people. Now, how about if you feel like you're not making any progress? Again, tied back to how we're taught to learn languages, it's really easy to feel like we're making progress in school because you get an exam at the end of the lesson and you get graded based on your progress in memorizing vocabulary words or conjugating or whatever skill you're building up in that particular lesson. But when we're learning languages independently, we have to be just as tangible with our goals to be able to see if we're making progress or not. And a lot of language learners make the mistake of trying to put fluency as their goal, which would be fine, except fluency doesn't mean anything, at least not specific. So to get the feeling that you're making progress in your language learning and all of the time that you're spending is actually beneficial to you, set a very specific milestone so that you have something to track your progress with. This could be ordering a coffee in your target language, be able to effectively talk about yourself in the past using the correct conjugations, things like that. These goals not only help you to see your progress, but they're also so much more personal and meaningful than just to keep your streak going every day. Because it doesn't matter if you have a 5-day streak or a 500-day streak, I promise you it means absolutely nothing. Because if you try and have a conversation with a native speaker of your target language and you tell them that you have a 500-day streak, they're just gonna be like, okay, and? Now, how about if you've taken a break from your language learning and you feel like you have to go back to the basics again? Or even scarier, if you haven't taken a break and all of a sudden you feel like all that basic knowledge has kind of like disappeared and you have to perfect that before I can continue on. So you end up, every single time you try and learn language, you end up going over the same basics over and over and over. I've been there, I get it. I promise you that you do not have to be perfect in the beginner stuff. Forgetting is normal and it's a part of the process. When you're learning a language, you are shoving so much information and experience into your brain that sometimes things are gonna like fall out a little bit, and that's okay. You don't have to learn them from scratch. You can pick them back up as time goes on. And I get it, because instead of leveling up and putting yourself in more vulnerable, scary situations, it feels a lot safer to stick with the basic stuff that you are pretty familiar with, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of vulnerability to put in the time learning a language. But you end up being bored and just kind of like running in circles. The next common problem is the fear of speaking. This is especially common with introverts and those with social anxiety who do not like to speak even in their native language. I am one of those people. The solution here is to practice speaking, and this seems obvious, but hold on. You don't have to throw yourself into conversations. You don't have to meet a random stranger on the internet and have like an hour-long conversation. None of that is necessary. And in fact, if it's something that creates a whole obstacle barrier for you that makes it difficult to practice speaking, then that's not what you should be doing. You can back up like a lot and practice speaking in a much lower pressure way. This could mean talking to yourself. This could mean recording yourself speaking. This could mean having a conversation with AI. There are tons and tons of different options to practice speaking in a way that's a lot less stressful than just like a giant language exchange full of random people, as long as you're not avoiding the speaking. Everybody makes mistakes, especially in language learning, but you gotta make those mistakes to learn how to have a conversation. Now, I have a ton more examples, but I do not want to be a video that you use to procrastinate your own language learning. So if I missed your problem, go to the link below and schedule a free consultation with me. I help people design their language learning strategy so that it works for their goals, their habits, and their brains. So if you want to build a language learning strategy that actually sticks to your brain, click the link below. Because remember, you and your procrastination are not the problem. The strategy that you're using is, and we can fix that. Once we fix that, then the motivation will just show up. And of course, if you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new one all about how to learn languages. Bye.